Hello, this is Andrew Grease from Quality Equipment and Spray, QSpray.com, your spray equipment expert. And today we're going to talk about the hose on your pest and landscape power sprayer. We're going to do a quick hose primer for you. Selecting the right hose for your power sprayer is critical. It's critical to your safety. It's critical to preventing equipment damage, which means saving money and downtime. And certainly it's important to productivity, to making sure you get the most productivity out of your sprayer and get the most work done as quickly as possible. So today's discussion, we're going to talk about the difference between suction hose and pressure hose. We're going to talk about spray hose selection, and I'm going to share some hose productivity tips to save you some money and prevent some downtime. Suction hose versus pressure hose, what's the difference? First of all, suction hose is on the input side of the pump. It's the piece of hose between the tank and the pump, whereas pressure hose is all the hoses on the output side or pressure side of the pump. So the most critical factor when talking about pressure hose versus suction hose is for suction hose, it can't collapse. You don't want the suction hose to collapse when the pump is sucking, because then no water will get through, the pump will starve, and you'll pretty good chance of doing some pretty serious damage to that pump. Pressure hose, on the other hand, burst pressure is important. You want to make sure it can handle the output pressure of that pump. So for example, if the pump's a 300 psi pump, you need hose that's at least 300 psi so it won't burst when you start that pump. Okay, size. For suction hose, the most critical factor is you don't want to starve the pump. You want to make sure that pump has plenty of water, and you want to use hose that's at least as large as the input side of the pump. So if your pump has a 1-inch input fitting, you want to use at least 1-inch ID hose for your suction hose. You can use bigger, you don't want to use smaller. And on pressure hose, the most important thing is really productivity, making sure you're getting the most output out of that pump and that sprayer. When we're talking about wear, suction hose really doesn't get much wear. We see it will wear only through age or through sun damage, but it's really not getting the kind of work on it that pressure hose gets, particularly spray hose. And spray hose and pressure hoses you want to watch a lot more closely because they're under a lot more stress generally than suction hose. Here's an example. I want to show you what these different hoses look like. So this is a diaphragm pump, and you can see at the green arrow is pointing to the suction hose, and you can see it's a clear hose with a wire running through it. And that wire prevents that hose from collapsing. Like we said, the most important thing on suction hose is it can't collapse because you'll starve the pump. On the other hand, the blue arrows are now pointing to the output hoses or pressure hose, and the hoses here are the bypass to the tank, the output to the hose reel or to the boom, and to the jet agitation. And you can see here we just use regular Pest or ag spray pressure hose for those output or pressure hoses there. Okay, let's talk about spray hose selection. Your spray hose is probably the most important piece of hose on your power sprayer, and it's the hose that's going to get the most work and the most abuse. So first, when you're talking about spray hose selection, you want to look at inside diameter. Most of the pest and landscape applications are 3/8 or 1/2 inch inside diameter hose. There are some applications that use larger hose, such as 5/8, 3/4, or 1 inch. These would be your larger applications, such as termite pre-treats or weed pre-emergent jobs, large jobs where you want lots of volume really quickly. Larger ID hose obviously gives you more volume, but it's heavier and it costs more. And the heavier is the real factor there. If you're using it all day, that weight can really add up and make you really wear you out at the end of the day. Smaller ID hose has greater pressure and volume loss, so there's more pushback, more resistance, more pressure and volume loss with that smaller hose. So you want to match your hose to your pump, and you want to match it to your desired output in gallons per minute and PSI to make sure you don't have a mismatch. For example, if you have a very low pressure pump, putting a 400-foot piece of hose on there, it just isn't going to make any sense. You're not going to get the output you need, and your productivity is going to suffer. Okay, when it comes to hose length, what do we look at? Well, hose comes in 200, 300, and 400-foot rolls, so you generally want to pick a hose of that length. As we mentioned, you want to match it to the pump. You want to be able to reach the furthest point on your largest stop. So if you can't reach every point on your stop with your hose is too short. Next thing to think about is hose wears out and hose is cheap, so it's better to have too much hose than not enough, because you're going to be cutting hose away every year. It wears out. You want to make sure you have plenty of hose. Spray hose tips. You don't want to wait for your hose to get in the kind of condition you see in these photos here. We recommend when you're rewinding the hose back onto the reel, you run the hose through a rag. And this will do two things. One, it'll remove debris such as stones, pebbles, grit, sand, thorns, things that can damage your hose. And two, it'll help you roll the hose nice and evenly back onto the reel, which A, looks nicer, and B, you want to make sure that the hose isn't all bunched up on one side of the reel, because then you can force the reel out of true and really cause some damage. You want to inspect your hose regularly for wear, damage, and leaks. And if you're running it through a rag and putting it back on the reel and watching it, you'll be doing that every time you rewind it. You want to cut off worn hose before it leaks. Do not wait for it to leak. Do not try to get an extra day or week out of it. The downtime will kill you. Just cut it off, bite the bullet, get rid of that bad hose to prevent that leak. Periodically, we recommend you unroll your hose all the way. What happens is, as hose ages, sometimes it gets kind of mushy and soft. And if you've rewound it on there tight, sometimes some of these low pressure pumps have problems pushing through that hose. So we recommend you unroll the hose all the way, start up the pump, and then evenly roll that hose back onto the reel. This can prevent some problems. And lastly, and this is the money shot right here, periodically reverse your hose. It's the output side of the hose that's going to get all the wear. And so if you once every year, twice a year, just reverse the hose so that the output side is now on the input, and vice versa, you'll get a lot more wear and a lot more time on that hose than you would if you just kept using it the same way. Hope these tips help. If you think this had value, then please think of qspray.com when you need power sprayers, components, parts, kits, or spray hose. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.